Ben Harrison on the Iron Mindset podcast. Finally.
Thank you for having me on. It's good to be here.
My absolute pleasure, man. I know this is something we talked about a little bit before, but I'm really grateful that you were able to give me some of your time today. But we were obviously just having a chat there a bit about coaching, how to deal with individual lifters, how to respond to different cues and feedback. But I'm sure there's numerous people listening, particularly from the IrishPF, that know who you are. But for anyone that's only peripherally aware of KAOS or yourself, I'd love to know more about not only how you fell into coaching in general, but how KAOS became like this pinnacle in the IrishPF, but also, as you said yourself, not strictly a powerlifting gym, strength-based gym, strength training gym. Talk me through it.
So, if we're talking about it from my perspective, I've lifted weights since I was about 13 years old, and I always did it. I played rugby for years, and I was always in the gym for that. Then I was just training in commercial gyms, and I actually got kicked out for using chalk or dropping a deadlift or something like that, and it was like the third or fourth time they'd given out to me, and it was like every time I came in, the manager was like picking on me. So I was like, do you know what? I'm done with this. And my brother sent me a Facebook post for this. I was like, this new place has just opened up in Selbridge. We should check it out. So I went along, and it was this dingy warehouse. It was literally just a rack, bar, and some plates. And I was like, okay, this is cool. I can train here. They're not going to give out to me for doing what I'm doing. So I'd been kind of. I was working an office job at this time, and after I'd been in KAOS for about a month, and like there was a few other people in the gym that had like asked me to spot them or help them with things, and yeah, I'd done that. The trainer that was working there left, so the owner asked me if I would take over a couple of classes just until she found someone else. So I did that, and then it got to it was very obvious that like the gym wasn't making money and it wasn't going to last very long. So I put some changes in, we restructured, like it was like pay as you go classes and all that sort of stuff. So I was like, we need to restructure this and how you're running this, or otherwise you need to get clients to commit over a longer period of time than having 20 people here one night and one person here the next night, sort of thing. So we restructured that, and then that was kind of my intro into coaching. Now I'd always been around coaches through different sports. Like I swam when I was younger, I was playing rugby then, and then just, helping people out in different scenarios. Like I because I'd always been in the gym, any other lads that were playing would come to me and be like, here, I have no idea what I'm doing here. Give me a hand. So, but formally my coaching was like boot camp classes, and KAOS was how I started. And then we restructured it to like more strength and conditioning based classes. So that's how I kind of got my general population coaching started.
Just a question, did that actually see a bit of an upswing then in, you were mentioning the gym wasn't doing so well. So when you rebranded and restructured it, things started to go positively.
What we did was it was just like pay as you go boot camp style classes. So there was like kettlebells, battle ropes, prowler, that sort of stuff. But because it was pay as you go, there was never any incentive for people to come regularly or continuously. So there was never that much repeat business. You'd get a lot of like drop-ins, would do one session, you'd never see them again. So what I said to the owner was like, why don't we put together like an 8-week training block where you get like, I think it was 6 people at the time, and they pay for the 8 weeks up front, and then we give them set times. You can train at this time, this time, and this time on a Monday, Wednesday, Friday, or whatever it was. We'll, give them a diet plan to follow, and we'll check their nutrition logs when they come in to train. And we did that for 8 weeks. And I think there was 10 people the first time we did it. And then the next time they did it, so after that, 8 weeks ended, the gym actually moved location. And then we kind of did another 8 weeks, and there was like 16 people that time, and then it went to 20 people the next time, and it was all word of mouth. It was all like they'd leave a Google review or a Facebook review, and then they'd bring a friend for the next block of 8 weeks, and it just kind of snowballed from there. And the most of what we do at the moment actually is still those 8-week kind of Gen Pop strength and conditioning courses. How I got into powerlifting was when I first joined KAOS, and I was still playing rugby. It was in the middle of the off season, and there was a couple of lads that trained in KAOS at the time that actually competed equipped in the GPC. And one of them was like, you're pretty strong. Like, you should come do a meet. And I was like, what the hell is powerlifting? This was 2015, I think it was. So I signed up for, I think it was GPC Open Nationals, which I don't know how an Open Nationals work, but it did, in Patrickswell in Limerick. Right. Signed up on 2 weeks notice, had no idea what powerlifting was. Went down to that, and that was an eye-opener. I don't know if you've ever been in Patrickswell, but it's not actually there anymore. Jerry McNamara, who ran Patrickswell, he had like a work shed in a yard in Limerick, and that's what it was. There was an outhouse. There wasn't a toilet. It was literally a hole in the floor. There was one mono. I'd never squatted out of a mono. And in the GPC, once you unrack, you're not allowed to move your feet. So and there was like 20 people trying to warm up on one mono. So I think I got like 3 reps in. Didn't know it was a 25 kilo bar I was using. None of that. So I came out of that and I was like, I don't think I'm ever going to do that again. Like that was like, it was something like our first squat was at like 10:30 in the morning, and my last deadlift was like 11 o'clock that night. I went and got a full carvery between bench and deadlift. Like, so I was like, no, I'm kind of done with that. So then I was, obviously still working in KAOS and training with them. And then a couple of guys came in. Scott was one of them actually, who was going to do an IrishPF Leinster Open. And they convinced me to sign up for it. And I was like, oh, this is a totally different animal.
Yeah.
Now I actually bombed out that first meet because I didn't know the rules. But,
fair, yeah.
And so I bombed out that first meet, and that was in the February. And then there was an Ulster Open in the March. And I was like, I can't let that be my last thing I do in the sport. So I signed up for March, and there was a few people from the kind of strength and conditioning classes that were, once we told them we'd done a powerlifting meet, they were like, oh, that sounds pretty cool. Like, I'd be kind of interested in doing that. So I think three or four of them did it, and I coached them through it, having, like I just said, bombed out because I didn't know the rules. Yeah. Brought 4 people to a powerlifting meet a month later.
Well, I'm sure you knew the ruals.
I learned them pretty quick.
Much after bombing out, yeah.
Learned them pretty quick. And one of them actually is like, she'd be my longest continuous client. Like I still coach Donna Ivy. I still coach her to meets and stuff now. So that was 7 years ago, something like that. Yeah. And then it's just kind of blown up from there. That
is the best and probably most efficiently told origin story ever. So to abridge it, it sounds like you had a really big sporting background growing up.
Yeah, huge.
And then naturally you got fucked out of a commercial gym. So you got drawn to this gym where you were allowed to train as you wanted. Obviously became a mainstay, got involved in teaching the classes, ended up taking over, and now run the gym successfully to this day. And it's, you mentioned you moved locations at some stage in there.
Twice.
Yeah. So the gym looks brilliant on Instagram. I think it looks like good crack. And as I was mentioning before we start recording, I think KAOS has like a really cool group of people that come to all the IrishPF meets. And that's something I want to kind of get into a little bit more about community and things like that. But you mentioned that the difference between your experience in the GPC versus the IrishPF. And I think that's a really, really big thing, because all the like legends and all the like lore of the past of even Irish powerlifting, people will talk about that, like, going out for a full meal between like your squats and your deadlifts, or squats and bench, because that's just how long meets took. Whereas now we've all gotten hyper used to these really rapidly run meet. Like I think every meet, whether we're talking Ab Series or the IrishPF, from the opens all the way to the national level, and I know it can depend a lot on the volunteers, but they are run much more efficiently now. I'd imagine if you've been around that long in powerlifting, you've probably seen it evolve hugely over the past couple of years.
Yeah, definitely. I think the thing with the GPC was I was used to coming from a rugby background where I played at a particularly high level, particularly high. That sounds ridiculous. I played at a decently high level, right? And I played here. I played in Australia. I played over in Wales for a bit. I was at that level where there's a level of professionalism that when I walked into the GPC, I was like, this is so far removed from what my sporting experience has been up to this point. And I didn't know that wasn't what all of powerlifting was like. Like things like, looking back at it now, there were raw lifters and equipped lifters in the same flight. It was mad. And the flight was like 25 people long or something. It was crazy. And it's so different to what we see with the IrishPF. Like my first IrishPF meet was actually, it was a Leinster Open. I can't remember where it was. It was in some sort of a convention center, but there was a CrossFit competition going on as well. So like our warm-up area behind the platform backed on to where this CrossFit competition was starting, and there was like a white picket fence around the warm-up room. And it's like, looking back at it now, like it's so far removed. And that was I think it was 2016. That's so far removed from where the IrishPF is now, where the meets are like, they're really, really well run. They're really well laid out. Everybody, even when you said there, like some meets might take longer because of volunteers or whatever, for the most part, compared to some of the stuff you see online, IrishPF meets they just nail it. Yeah. You know what I mean? There's like if your flight takes longer than like 3.5 hours from your first squat to your last deadlift, everyone's like, oh God, this is taking forever. But like,
little do they know.
Yeah. I mean, there was that thing a couple of weeks ago in America where people were going mad because the WRPF said that they were going to introduce sessions instead of like everybody squats in the morning and then everybody benches in the afternoon and deadlifts in the evening. And there were people going mad about it, and I didn't understand. So I spoke to my coach. I'm coached by Joe Sullivan. I spoke to him. I was like, what are people talking about? What's happening in this? And he was like, oh, you know the way your meets are split into sessions? He's like, we don't do that. So he's like, we'll have 3 or 4 squat flights in the morning, 3 or 4 bench flights, and then 3 or 4 deadlift flights. And people are going mad because they're like, people won't be able to keep up with the pace of a 3-hour meet. And I'm like, what are you guys talking about? It's 9 lifts. Like, you know, but I suppose it depends on where you came from and what you're used to.
I think that's actually a big thing, I think, because I'm sure you've seen this. I think over the past couple of years, even in the 5 or so years I've been in powerlifting, I've seen the uptake of it, even in commercial gyms. So like I previously worked in FlyFit. I train a bit in Integrity Gym and Swords now as well. And the number of like young powerlifters is crazy. Like it's definitely gotten more popular. At least maybe to me, maybe I'm just seeing it now. It's like when people say think of a yellow car and you just start seeing yellow cars everywhere. But I definitely think there's been a much bigger uptake in powerlifting with the advent of like Instagram, TikTok, whatever it might be. For all their ills, they do make the sport more visible. And I think you'll see a lot of that. There's people that maybe don't really know a lot of like the history of what came before and how good it can be now. Like we had an experience where one of our junior lifters, Lan Gaffney, didn't know who Barry Pigott was. He walked into Abs one Saturday about 4 weeks ago, and the OGs all turned around like, oh my God, it's fucking Barry Pigott. Like, you know, the people that knew him went over and said hello and all, but like,
and that's so wild as well, because like I said there, my first IrishPF meet was 2016, and even then when I walked in then I felt like everybody that was there had been there forever. Now I know the IrishPF had only been set up like 6 months beforehand or something, but it was like they all knew each other from previously with like the IDFPA and stuff, and I felt like I was an absolute newbie and I didn't know who any of those people were. And now to think that the lifters that are starting now don't know who Barry is, or even like Brona, you know what I mean, like because they haven't been in the sport for 2 or 3 years, and it kind of puts it in perspective, like how quick the turnaround in this sport is.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? Like if I don't know, if Russ Swole stopped lifting today, in 2 or 3 years' time, everyone would be like, oh yeah, do you remember him?
Yeah.
You know, it wouldn't be someone that everybody remembers all the time, because it's just, there's such a turnover and there's always someone there to step up to the mantle after you as well.
I think it's the day and age we live in, though, with the accessibility to like content. There's always something new. Somebody's always doing something different, or making a new YouTube or a new Instagram or a reel or a short or whatever it might be. That like if somebody isn't in your feed regularly, you're kind of like, oh yeah, what happened to that guy? It's like,
it's that attention deficit disorder we all have now because of Instagram.
Straight up, people are like, oh yeah, he didn't post for 2 weeks. So did you retire from powerlifting? But
what I love seeing is when a lifter that doesn't particularly use social media turns up for a meet and like wins.
Yeah.
Like at Sheffield, was it Evie that won the women's side of things? Where she's not huge on social media, so like a lot of people didn't know who she was before she was coming in. She wasn't mentioned in any of the like the promo build-ups as being a potential contender, and then she came in and just demolished everybody. I love seeing that because it's like it was completely out of the blue, unexpected. And it's that personal story that I think makes more powerlifting more kind of interesting as well.
For sure. And that's a conversation Jay and I had. I can't even remember if we had it on our episode of the podcast or we've just had the chat. But he was saying he used to love going up to the meets when no one knew what anybody else was doing, and the lads would all be spoofing each other about their lifts, waiting to weigh in and all, just talking shit, like, because you didn't know what was happening until it got out on the platform. So I kind of, in one way, I think that's kind of cool. And as much as I would generally think social media adds a lot to how the sport has been perceived worldwide.
Without doubt. Powerlifting would not be the sport it is today without social media. Like there would still be cool stuff happening, but you wouldn't know about it. Like there might be a magazine coming out once a month or something that very few people would actually read.
Yeah.
But like it gives an insight into what is essentially like a top level athlete. You know what I mean? And you're kind of walking through their day to day and their training, and that's never really been done before. And it's one of the few sports where you can literally watch someone's entire training cycle. Like that doesn't happen in other sports. Like I said, I'm coming from a big rugby background. It would be mental to me if like the All Blacks were putting up like, oh, here we are doing line out drills today, and this is the lads in the gym this afternoon, and it doesn't happen like that. And I think it gives this really cool insight, and it makes the sport accessible to everybody. And I think that's what drives the engagement as well, is like, you don't need fancy equipment. You can see these lads are just in a gym with a bar and some plates. Like, okay, it might be a ridiculously decked out gym, but it's still just a gym. The basic components are the same. Yeah. The basic components are the same.
I think it's that, like, people can watch it and understand what it is without it needing to really be explained. Like, it's a big deal for somebody to walk backwards out of a rack with a lot of weight on their back and sit down really deep and then stand back up with it. I think most people can interpret why that's good. Same with like picking a deadlift up off the floor. You're picking a big weight up off the floor, and then universally everybody knows what a bench press is. That's why it's the first question you get asked by anyone who knows to go to the gym.
Bench?
How much do you bench? And that's how they're going to validate whether or not you're training hard enough. And it doesn't matter if you say anything over 100 kilos, it's heavy.
Yeah.
But question for you then, as somebody who's kind of been around the scene for so long, what have you seen change? Like, what have you observed, whether it's culturally or the way meets are run, anything? Like, what have you observed as one of the OG? Because I would consider you an OG now at this stage.
That's so wild to me.
Yeah, but I mean, come on, think about it. If you're around, like
I get it.
If your first meet was 6 or so months after the Irish PF had formed in 2015, 2016, like you've been around since the early days of it. So you probably have had enough scope to see it change and evolve over time, both from the people participating in it, how meets are run, how clubs interact, how we use social media, and then even down to, has this changed anything in your own club, your own gym?
So in terms of how it's changed, I think the culture of the sport, the culture of the Irish PF today is probably far more inclusive than it was back then. Now, maybe this is because, like you said, I've been around for a while, so I know all the players in the Irish PF at this stage, whereas back then, walking in, I didn't really know them. Mm-hmm. But initially, for the first year or two, it always felt like there was like an in crowd and then there was everybody else. And I don't think that was done deliberately. I think it was just this group of people knew each other for a long time. They're running the Fed together and everybody else is just everybody else. Now, to me, it feels like it's far more inclusive. Now, it might just feel like that because I might be one of those ones that are on that inner circle, in quotation marks. But it feels like it's a lot, it wasn't unwelcoming back then, but it feels a lot more, everybody knows everybody now. Mm-hmm. You know, there's no necessary pecking order with things. You know, if someone's at a meet, someone's at a meet. Whereas before it might have been like, oh, that's that person. Like they get to use that rack in the warm-up room. And look, again, maybe that's just how I perceived things at the time. Mm-hmm. But I mean, also like the standard has gone through the roof. Like in every metric, in terms of the actual lifting, in terms of the refereeing, in terms of the presentation of meets, in terms of the quality of the venues, even like everything has just it's just exponentially better than it was in 2016, and it's definitely like I'm far more likely to encourage someone to join it now than I would have been back then. Mm-hmm. Like, you know, I deal with a lot of people that aren't powerlifters every day, and if someone expressed an interest into me now, I would have zero hesitation in saying, okay, yeah, absolutely, sign up for a meet. Like, we can prep you for that. We can do all that stuff. Whereas previously, like even, I think it was 2018, we hosted a novice meet in KAOS that was not affiliated with any federation. And a big part of the reason I did that was it felt at the time that it was quite intimidating for novices to go to a competition. Yeah. Because, again, it was just this maybe an in-crowd and an out-crowd type thing, or maybe it was because I was on the out-crowd or whatever, I don't know. But it just felt like it was more intimidating for novices to start then than it might be now. And I don't know if like social media and accessibility to it played a part in that as well. I'm sure it did. But it definitely is more, I think it's more lifter friendly now than it was back then in a lot of ways as well.
I would strongly agree with that sentiment that like I know for anyone I've brought into the sport, and it's becoming a very high number of people at this stage now, they all report it as a massive net positive, not only to their training, because now they understand the importance of like showing up, putting the work in and having this outcome at their meet, whatever it might be, but also in their personal life, because they have this other thing that they go and do and they can talk about and show their friends that they do. Like it becomes that cute. So whatever about what they're loading on the bar kind of becomes less important, and it's more about like, oh, I'm a powerlifter. Like I put on this little onesie every couple of months and I go out and
I also think like once you reach a certain age, like once you're not a kid anymore, or maybe once you're out of college or wherever it is, I don't know where the line is exactly, but like there's very few people that go out and do cool shit all the time.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? And if you are stepping onto a platform to lift heavy weight, that's something that 99.9% of people probably will never even relate to in any way. Like people might go on hikes and they might do stuff like that, but it's not in a competitive nature. And I think it's something that, because the sport is so accessible and you can have literally anybody, like if you can squat, bench and deadlift 25 kilos, you can do a powerlifting meet, right?
Yeah.
I think because I deal with a lot of non-powerlifters that might eventually become powerlifters, or even if they don't, it adds that extra dimension to like, they have, like you said, they have something extra to talk about. They have a hobby now that they're heavily invested in, because I don't know any powerlifter that's not heavily invested in powerlifting. Yeah. It's like an all-consuming hobby. But yeah, it just, I feel like it gives people so much, and it's not necessarily, it's like the competition is a part of it, because I don't think unless you do a competition, you can actually call yourself a powerlifter. You can train like a powerlifter, but I don't think you're actually a powerlifter until you step on the platform.
Mm-hmm.
But it gives purpose. And it also does things like, you know, if you're going to do a powerlifting meet, you have to train.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have a choice. You can't like, it's rainy and I don't want to go outside. I'm just on the couch now. I don't want to go. You have to go.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas like the excuses that a lot of people will use to maybe skip the gym, you can't do that if you signed up for a meet. So it gives an extra drive to training. It gives an extra purpose to it. It gives an extra meaning to it. And then the meaning that's derived from the actual competition itself varies wildly from person to person, but it doesn't mean one is more meaningful than the other, if that makes sense. Like I look at powerlifting as like there's two very almost distinct sports within the one sport. Like there's competitive powerlifters, and then there's powerlifters that do it to compete with themselves.
Yep.
And it's such a wild variation. Like there's people go out to beat other people or to beat records or to win titles or whatever. And there's people that go out and are just like, I want a purpose for my training and I want to see that I'm getting better. And they're both entirely valid approaches to the sport. And they both, like, it's not that there's any more meaning attached to one than the other, because for the individual, if that's what their goals are, then yeah, let's get there.
For sure. And I think that's exactly what competing lends to people, because I'm sure you've seen it yourself. It's nice to have this conversation with you as somebody who coaches powerlifters, but also the general public, because I still do that too. And it's one thing I notice from anyone I have taken from a Gen Pop client who's just coming into, you know, look a bit better, move a bit better, feel a bit better, to then having them focus on this thing. I've got one guy I actually had at the Belfast Open in May, and it was body composition the whole way. That's what he wanted, you know, get in better shape. Like most people during COVID, during the lockdowns, got a bit doughy, a bit out of shape. Activity levels went down, food consumption went up. I think that's like everyone almost. So since he's decided to do powerlifting, and now especially since May, he's gotten more jacked, he's gotten stronger, and he's gotten leaner, because it's like the realization of every effort I put in now, every set and rep I dedicate to now will have the ultimate payoff later on. He's doing September Open now as well. So like watching that happen and that light bulb moment go for people is just, it's its own reward. Like, because I know people become fixated like about what weights on the bar, on the platform, their total, their dots or Wilks or whatever it might be. But really just watching people derive so much more value from the training and enjoy it, because so many people like act like training is this horrible thing they
or
have
it's
to
a
do.
punishment.
Yes, like it's that. I love that it reframes it. I can't wait for my deadlift session this week. I fucking love that shit, man. I know I had Raquel on during her second visit, and she was mentioning that, and I think it's a really important thing. Like, it gives some adults their first like adventure into any kind of sport. And I think that's the best thing about powerlifting. You don't need to be particularly coordinated or skilled to be able to do these three things. And that might be the difference maker for that person socially, how they perceive themselves, their capabilities, their body composition. All these things are just this massive net positive off the back of, do you want to do this powerlifting me?
Yeah.
It's huge.
And like when you were saying there, like socially as well, like the amount of times that we've had someone that's come into the gym, maybe contacted about like powerlifting coaching or whatever, and like you know, the first month that they're there, they're in the rack on their own and they don't make eye contact with anyone. And then like 3 or 4 months later, they're out talking shit with everybody and they're screaming at people while they're lifting. And it's like, you can literally see someone opening up and developing as well. What we were saying there about like powerlifting meets giving a purpose and a direction to training, that's kind of like, we try to do that a little bit with the Gen Pop stuff as well. Mm-hmm. So because I was saying there, like we do things in like 8-week blocks, what we tend to do is on week 8, they're going to be testing, a squat, a bench, or a deadlift. So it keeps people interested and it keeps them progressing towards that goal. Some people might not actually care about what weight's on the bar, but they know if they want to do well on that week, they've got to be there. And it's a way of just keeping people interested, keeping them committed to it, because they know at the end of this 8 weeks, okay, this is what I'm going to do. And, you know, if I want to do this, I need to be there. And some people don't care. And like I'm not going to push someone to do a 1 rep max if they really don't care about it. But like a lot of people, like they love that week 8. And, you know, we're at our current block, we're at week 7 now. So I think that this week they're hitting doubles with things.
Sweet. And
then next week, the buzz just starts to build before that week 8. And then on week 1, when we up the volume again, everyone's crying because they've got such DOMs.
I love that. I love that. You'll get that post-comp as well. Everyone goes back into the higher volume work. Like, fuck my life.
How did I get so unfit in 3 weeks?
Straight up, man. It is bizarre. Like, why am I feeling my quads on squats? You know what I mean? Yeah. But this is actually then a point, and I think it's something you can probably answer with that experience, because I do think that's important. As much as many of the listeners might be interested in the powerlifting perspective, sometimes I think we forget that most powerlifters just started as people going to the gym for whatever their motivations are. And I love the idea of you've taken essentially the 8-week transformation model, but made it about performance. And like I'd imagine you see across this time, because they know there's a test week coming at the end, their adherence to the week-on-week training is probably higher. And I know, are you guys still checking the food logs like you mentioned, or is that part of the strength work?
So that we do that as an optional extra now for people.
Cool.
We don't do it as like the base.
We
have too many clients to do that now. And I fucking hate saying that because it makes me sound like a braggy arsehole. But we have the classes have grown to this point now where it's like, if people want that extra dietary attention, then look, that's an optional extra that we can talk about.
Well, let me ask that question, and just on that piece with the diet, do you find if people are doing the 8-week strength block and they do opt in for the diet, do you find that their adherence to the diet is greater for those 8 weeks because they know there's an outcome?
I think it depends a lot person to person as well, because I think a lot of people like the idea of starting a diet until, and like, you know, we'll do everything as flexibly as we can with people, but you know, there's when you're starting a diet phase, regardless, there's some sacrifices that need to be willing to be made.
Absolutely.
And I think people like the idea of achieving that end goal, but then they don't want to maybe not have 12 pints on a Saturday.
Yeah.
You know, and when you say to them like, look, I'm not going to tell you to not have a beer, but maybe don't have 12 and then go get a Domino's on the way home. And, you know, I think the reality of it doesn't necessarily line up with what people's expectations of it are going to be. We don't put too much of a focus on that kind of thing. Like what we're saying is, when I don't sell this as a transformation block. I'm not like you're gonna lose weight or whatever. What we say is you're gonna come in, if you want to get stronger, you want to gain a little bit of muscle, you want to get fitter, you want to look a bit better and feel more confident. That's what this is.
Yeah,
we're not selling it as a weight loss thing. It started off that way, but we've definitely drifted away from that because one, it puts some people off. Like there's so many more goals to training than there is just weight loss. So, you know, we wanted something that would appeal to as many people as we could appeal to, but still make it as applicable to as many people as we could. So we put a big emphasis on strength, but then we also there's like every session will have a hypertrophy block and like a conditioning block as well. So, you know, they're getting the strength training, the hypertrophy and the conditioning in the one session. So there's definitely something there for everybody. And yeah, the adherence with some people is higher, but they tend to be the people that would be more adherent to something anyway, because they've already made that commitment in their head that they're like, this is what I'm going to do. And look, for a lot of people, just getting in the gym at any stage is an achievement in itself.
Huge.
So, you know, once people are in there, we're gonna push them to what we think they're capable of doing. But I'm also not gonna push it to the point where that person is like, they can't handle the stress of it. You know what I mean? Because like, you know, you deal with a lot of people that they're not a lot like, we'd be a lot of people's like first, like I'd say proper training gym, you know what I mean? As opposed to just going in on a treadmill or whatever. So we can't be too heavy handed with that sort of stuff. You want to get them in and get them training regularly first. And then what happens is 90% of the time they get hooked and then they don't leave. Like we've got something like over a 90% retention rate with our clients from 8-week block to 8-week block to 8-week block. I've got clients who've been doing it for 7 years now.
That's huge. That's massive. Like that, I think maybe like you only can understand the relevance of that if you've worked in this setting before. Because usually, particularly for most people, if like say they have like a financial situation where they need to cut things out, the first thing most people get rid of is training or the gym or the coach or a PT. So if you're retaining that, your retention rate is that high, that speaks volumes to the work yourself and your team are doing.
But this is like, I think you touched on it earlier when you mentioned the word community, and it's like, this is what we try to bring to everything that we do. Like the main, what I try to remember with Gen Pop in particular, with powerlifters, it's a little bit different because they've got a goal. They have to be in there and they have to be working, right? With Gen Pop people, just getting them, like I've said this before in an Instagram post and it was taken up the wrong way, but other gyms are not our competition when it comes to this stuff. Our competition is Netflix. Our competition is Just Eat. Our competition is getting people off the couch and getting into the gym. That is ultimately the main goal, because that way we're making the biggest impact we can with people in general. So if we get people into the gym, just training regularly, that is such a big part of it. So my goal with every client that walks through the doors, I want coming into the gym to be the best part of their day. I want them to go home buzzing. I want them to go home and be delighted and happy with life, right? That doesn't always happen. Look, some people are going to like try it for a couple of weeks and be like, I don't really like this. And that's fair enough. And that happens, right? But because we make it not a social occasion, but we'll have the crack with people while they're training. We'll try to have a laugh and a joke with everybody. We'll try to get everybody feeling good about it while we're training, and not in some dancey around we're cheerleaders kind of way. Like we're still making, like, everybody squats, benches, and deadlifts. You know, we're not doing step aerobics classes here. But when they come in and then they start to, you know, you can literally see people start to feel better about themselves as the weeks go on. And like clients who, I always say it to new people, especially with like, if like a middle-aged woman would come in week 1, they're like, I have to put that thing on my back. I'm like, yep, you're going to do that. And in 6 weeks time, you're going to laugh that you were scared of that and that you thought that was heavy. And you can literally see it happening week to week. And it's so cool, man. And I think it also gives me a slightly different perspective on powerlifting as well, because I'm not just working with powerlifters. You get this different notion of, you get this different idea of what training is and what it can be to people. Where I think for if you're only working in powerlifting, you take it for granted that people just lift weights. Like, no, they don't. Very, very few people actually lift weights regularly and consistently. And it's increasing that to as many people as we can and trying to improve lives through strength training. Like that's actually on our Instagram bio, and I hate it and it's cheesy as shit, but it's what we try to do.
Well, it's a huge, I think like you said, I think it's having that big, wider perspective, because you're not just hyper focused on this one niche of the market. You see the value doing some basic strength and resistance training adds to the average person's life. And like you said, average people typically don't train or don't train regularly. And I know you mentioned community, and I think as one of the big points of your gym, obviously. But I know for myself, and this is one thing I really try to not take for granted. I'm very lucky that I have a core group of people I train with very regularly. And it's one thing we do, and most community-based gyms, KAOS, Odyssey, City Gym, Abs, I assume they all do it to their own way of promoting that, you know, camaraderie within the setting. I know for me, I've gone through periods of like very low motivation to train, but I go because my mates are gone. And that is what has kept me more consistent over the past 5 years than anything else, no matter whether it's working towards a competition or wanting to hit certain numbers or, you know, to be the guy that lifts the weights. The fact that I'm like, oh, well, fucking Vinny's got a heavy set of squats today, so I better go in and spot him. You know what I mean?
It's that accountability.
100%.
You know what I mean? And maybe accountability is not the right word to use it in all certain situations of that, but like, if you missed that session because Vinny did have a big squat, you'd feel shit about yourself.
Yes.
Right?
I would feel worse about not showing up than any like extra hour in bed would have given me to not be in Abs at 9 a.m. to be there for him. You know what I mean? I would always, and I think that's the same for most things. Like, because I've got like a lot of lifters now coming into some of them are coming into their first competitions, and you know, 6 weeks out, they all start shitting themselves. They want to hit the oh shit button, and some of them are like really terrified, right? But I'm trying to like give them that guarantee. You'll obviously know what I mean by this, because you've obviously been through it dozens and probably hundreds of times now at this stage with all the people you've coached and yourself. It's when it's said and done, they'll all be like, I had such a good day, regardless to what happened.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the point, particularly with new lifters who are going into their first meet, right? And particularly ones that become, I'm sure you deal with this as well, become hyper-focused on numbers before their first meet. They're like, well, I want to win my weight class. And you're like, whoa, dude, you don't even know if you like the sport yet, right? Like, win your weight class. Stop. Some people go their entire career without ever winning anything. So like, firstly, put the brakes on with that, right? The goal for the first day is to go out, it's to complete as many lifts as you possibly can, and it's to enjoy yourself as much as we possibly can, because we want to get you hooked on this, and we want this to be a marathon, not something you do 2 or 3 meets and then you drop off. You know? And like, I mean, that is how do you get someone stronger? You make them train for 10 years.
Yes.
Right.
So it's a long game, man.
Absolutely.
Do you know what you say there? It's so funny, because I do, like, by the time this goes out, this will all be said and done. But I've got like, we're like 2.5 weeks out from Ab Series 14, and I've like so many new lifters going in. They do like divisions and abs rather than weight classes. But like 2 of the girls I have in particular, like, I know you keep saying not to focus on the podium, but like, I'm like, the fucking podium. What are you doing thinking about the podium? Let's just have a good day. Like but I think it's like you have to kind of put yourself back in their shoes, because they've nothing else to compare it to. They're like, oh, this is, you do this to win. It's like, I would always frame it to somebody like this. If you could win something in your very first competition, right? You're either an extremely gifted athlete, which most of us aren't, or the competition really wasn't that stiff. Would you not rather work harder for longer and beat people that are really good than kind of get it handed to you on day one?
Yeah, like if you're winning on day one, is it worth it? Does it mean anything? You know, whereas, yeah, you're dead right with that, and it's funny because it's so predictable as well. You know, like you get some lifters and people. I think I heard you say it before where someone approached you and were like, oh, I'd be in the 93 kilo class. Like, how do I beat Keen Madden? I'm like, dude, train for 10 years.
Yeah. I'm still trying to figure that one out myself.
You know what I mean?
Keen
Like,
Madden,
it's, people like, I've said it to people loads. I'm like, okay, if the only thing that anybody was getting out of competition was the medal, nobody would have ever put in a race against Usain Bolt.
Yeah.
Say it again. He would have ran in the Olympics with empty lanes either side of him.
Yeah.
And particularly with powerlifting, because so much of what you do isn't on the platform, right? It's not like team sports where you play a game every single weekend.
Mm-hmm.
Because you have months and months at a time of building up to essentially 9 minutes on the platform. The 9 minutes on the platform, while that is the sport, all that other stuff, all that other months, that's the important stuff that gets you to that 9 minutes.
Yeah.
And if you're just focusing on that 9 minutes, you're missing so much of the journey.
Yeah.
For sure. You're missing the wood for the trees.
I completely agree. That was those sets of words. We to bring up another chat I had with Raquel, it was the same thing. We were saying like she had a meet that didn't go to plan for a couple of months back at Last Chance in 2022 in December. And it was reframing the idea that like, despite the meet maybe not being what you wanted, you still have that 6, 9, 12 months or however long it's been of training sessions, laughs with your mates, the gains that came with that, whether they've been like astronomical or minimal, you still put in all that work. And even if you could, would it be worth trading what you finished on for a medal or a trophy, but sacrifice all that? Like you got it's like, maybe the real, maybe the real reward or the real treasure was the friends we made along the way.
Yeah. And I know you're taking the piss with that, but that like, I always try to bring myself back to, okay, my highlights that I remember as a coach from powerlifting, I can't tell you what the weight that the person lifted when they came off the platform was, but I can tell you exactly how they felt. I can tell you I can tell you the hug that they gave as they came off the stage. I can tell you all that shit. I couldn't tell you what that lift, like if you showed me a video of it now, I'd be like, oh, I remember that moment. I couldn't tell you what was on the bar, what was at stake for it. Yeah. And look, maybe this is a bit like, I'm sure, like when we were saying earlier, the two types of powerlifters, I'm sure the more competitive ones are listening to this going like,
yeah,
shut up.
Like it's about medals. They're in like such a narrow focus. It's such a different level for those people. And that's like, Jesus, the two things can coexist.
Absolutely. And they should coexist. Yeah. Like this is the beauty of sport, is that no matter what your goals or what your ambitions are, there is something to be obtained from sport. Yeah. And it like powerlifting in particular, I've been involved in a few sports in my life, and it's weird. It's weird how much meaning people can take out of it. And I think that's it. It gives, when I said earlier, like it gives your training meaning, it gives you more meaning as well. It gives you more direction and purpose. And like I've noticed with people, like I've noticed with myself as well, when my training is going well and when I'm like really in it, like if I'm in a block and the block is going well, most aspects of my life go better as well. I'm more disciplined with other things that then lead me. It's the ultimate experience in delayed gratification. Yeah. So that you're doing all this work now for potentially 9 minutes on the platform.
Completely agree. And that stands, like I'm going through that right now in the prep for Western Euros. Like I had to like completely pivot. I was meant to be doing the IPF flight in AB series in 2.5 weeks. Then I got the Western Euros invite. So I was like bulking into that. And now I have to like 180 to get back under 93. So like sleep has to be adhered to exactly. I have to do like X number of steps. I have to only go to a certain amount of calories, whatever it might be. And training now is 10 times more important because there's this thing to come at the end. It doesn't, and this is not me just trying to sound like a mature athlete, right? This is just for levity's sake, from being around this thing for this long. And I know not as long as yourself or some others, but like I'm glad that I've learned this in the time. It's like, for me with like that competition in Western Euros, it's not about what I'm going to lift on a day. It's the fact that I've been invited to be there. You know what I mean? And that's the achievement has been achieved. Now it's just to show up and take the victory lap. But I really agree with one thing you said. I just want to say, because I know I really want to let you talk, because I think you're saying a lot of interesting things that are making my brain go burr, right? So I think you could never finish on a podium. You could never come in the top 10. You could always be the last person in your flight. But you engaging in activity, whether it's powerlifting or another sport, is fundamentally a superior person to who you might be otherwise. Because as you mentioned, and I completely agree with, and I've experienced myself, and I've seen it happen, you tend to put more focus into other areas by being disciplined in this one thing. Like I know by being regimented, it makes me regimented to make sure I make time for people in my life that are important, because I want to, well, if I'm going to train for like 2.5 hours, I want to make sure I'm giving these people equal amounts of attention, so they don't think I'm just that weirdo that spends all day in the gym. It means that like when I have a social occasion as well, it means more to the person, because they know like, you know, Ian's trying to diet now, but he still made the effort to come out. You know what I mean? Although I will say that first pint I have after in
that's
Iceland,
gonna be so sweet.
That's gonna be good, man.
Yeah.
So, but like, that's the thing. It's like I definitely feel that it makes me more adherent to all these other things, much more disciplined person. I think it makes me in the long run a better coach. It makes me a better friend, a better lifter. And even for things like this with the podcast, this is one of the things I love about powerlifting. Not only does, and part of the reason I started the podcast, because I get to chat to people like you, and it's one of the things I love about it when if we look at the community in a broader sense and not just individual gyms, it's given me the opportunity to like form all these bridges to get to know people, you know? So yeah, man, like I'm vibing with that one, you know?
Just when you were talking about discipline there, it's that saying, it's like how you do one thing is how you do everything.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're pushing your discipline in one aspect of your life, you can't, like, it's not going to fall off in other aspects of your life. So if you're being disciplined with your training and you're regimented and you're going at the right times, everything, for me anyway, everything seems to just click into place when that happens. And I know at times when I try to prioritize other things and I let my training maybe slip off a little bit, everything else goes to shit. Like, and it happens all the time. And I don't know why I keep trying to do it. I'm like, training needs to take the back burner for the next month. I've got this other really important thing that I need to look at. And by letting my training go down the pecking order, everything goes down the pecking order. And then I just end, like, it's like when I'm training hard, everything just feels better.
Yeah.
You know, I feel like this is the thing. If you have a shitty day, but you can go in and get a training session done, even if it's not the most amazing training session in the world, you've accomplished something.
Yes.
Right? And you've accomplished something that you can look around and you can go into the office the next day and you'd be like, I did more than all of you people did yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
And not to say that in a superiority kind of way, but like in a I'm just because I had a shitty day yesterday, I didn't let it impact this thing, and that made me feel good about myself.
Have you ever heard the expression, I will do today what others won't, so tomorrow I can do what others can't?
Yeah.
Like, I think some people read that expression wrong, as if it's to do something despite other people. It's no. I would frame it to myself or to other people as that I do all this now. So if I'm lucky enough to live to 70 or 80 or whatever, I'm going to be a much more capable elderly person than what we stereotypically think of elderly people.
Yeah.
You know, like one thing I love about strength training, that's why I'm actually a really big fan of the idea that you guys have this like real strength focused, like these group training sessions you do, because I don't think there's any negative to just being stronger. Like, I think, say, like, the whole thing, like, I had Stephen Tierney on here. His gym is primarily focused on transformations, like physiques and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And now he has a really good handle on it. They have a very stringent screening process to make sure the client's the right person for it. But, like, there's so much that goes into diet. There's so much that goes into relationship with food. And it can be, for some people, regardless to how many precautions you take, you could still be adding some complication. So I do applaud him for taking what I would consider to be a much more tumultuous route than just let's get people jacked and strong, because that is always going to be a net positive. Somebody having a bit more muscle, somebody being able to perceive external load a lot more favorably than they otherwise would have. And even just the mental switch to feel like, oh, I'm not this fragile thing that's going to fall apart the moment I have any external hardship. I can, whatever, deadlift 80 kilos. I can squat 60 kilos.
I can see it with my own parents. So my parents are in their early 60s. They both just retired like 3 months ago. But both of my parents my dad has been in the gym since he was 11 years old, and he stopped pre-COVID because he had a shoulder surgery, but he's getting back into it now. My mum was playing international hockey until she was in her mid-50s.
Oh, wow.
And I can see that, like, the level of fitness and strength that they have now, if you didn't know them and you'd be like, how old are they? You would never say mid-60s. Do you know what I mean? They're young for their age because of the training they've put in, and it's the fountain of youth, man. And
was that an influence on you growing up? Just how
huge. Like, I was put into sport from a really, really young age. So, like, really young. My first experience of sport was like karate when I was like 5 or 6 years old. And then at the same time we were kind of doing with our primary school, we used to go to like swimming classes. And after like a year, the person who was taking the swimming class with the school turned to my teacher and was like, you need to put him in a swimming club. Like, he's very good. So my mum used to like get up at 5 o'clock in the morning to drive me to swimming. I'd be in the pool for 2 hours before school. Then I'd go to school. And then I'd go rugby training after school. And like I swam competitively for years. I represented Leinster and I represented Ireland. And then when the time for rugby took over, my dad coached my rugby team from the time I was like 10 years old. And he coached all the way up to senior level. And he like followed the team up. But yeah, no, the impact that my parents have had on that is, like, I wouldn't be the person that I am now if I wasn't encouraged into these sports. And like, there were absolutely times where I was like 14, 15, I was like, I don't want to fucking go to this shit. And they'd be like, go, just go, right? And like, when my dad being my coach, I didn't have a choice. I was put in the car and dragged to training. But like, it was, no, like the impact that they've had on me is massive. And even things like it's shown me how important like discipline and training can be, and not just for the purpose of competition, but just for life in general. Like my dad is like mid-60s now. My parents are originally Welsh. So my dad moved over here when I was 4, so 30 odd years ago. All of his best friends are still lads that he grew up playing rugby with. My mum would be the same with her hockey friends. Like, and I'm the same with the lads that I grew up playing rugby with. Like most of my really close friends are lads that I played rugby with from the time I was 11 till the time I was 28. So like the impact that sport and competition and training in general has had on my life, like I wouldn't be the same person if I didn't have that. And I don't know, if I didn't have that, I don't know how much I would be like at this age. I can't, like, I have people all the time that join the gym when they're in their 50s and you know, later or, you know, earlier in their 40s or whatever. And I'm like, if you've never done this before, I can only imagine how intimidating it is to walk into somewhere like this, which is why, like, I think that gives me the perspective of like, I want to make this as enjoyable for them as possible while also making sure it's still effective for them. But yeah, no, my parents, yeah, it was funny. Like when I started powerlifting, my dad, he like he's a massive rugby head, has been his whole life, and he always used the gym for rugby. Like he taught me how to lift weights when I was younger. But it was like, what do you mean you just lift weights for your sport? I was like, you lift weights to be better at sport. Lifting weight is not the sport, you know? So he kind of still doesn't understand it or doesn't get it. He never got the bug, if that makes sense. But yeah, I mean, Jesus, a year before COVID, he'd still come into the gym and bench with me sometimes. And like, I think it was
that's sweet,
58,
man.
59. He benched like 140 for 10 or something.
Holy shit.
Yeah, like legitimately an animal, man.
Holy shit.
And like, it was when we used to do like pre-season training with running, with rugby, my mum, because she played international hockey, she also ran like half marathons and shit like that. Like when pre-season was starting up again, I'd like go out for a run with her and she'd leave me in puddles as well. And I'd be like, this whole, like, you know, when they're your role models, it's not a pressure to live up to them, but it's like, well, this is just what people do.
Well, can I actually I was going to say something else, but just on that was something I heard. I was doing a little bit of cardio earlier on and I listened to that and somebody was talking about not to put pressure on X for Y, but blah, blah, blah. And just as you mentioned it there, is it really a problem even if there was pressure? Because I don't think it's necessarily a problem for them to have a degree of expectation on their, sounds like quite talented son. You know what I mean? And I think sometimes nowadays we conflate the idea of pressure with negativity. Whereas if somebody's trying to put pressure on you to be a certain thing or be a certain way or live up to a standard, it probably means they're invested in your positive outcomes.
So the pressure that was put on, if any pressure was put on, it wasn't pressure to win. It was pressure to commit.
So show up.
Pressure to show up and just go do the job. Go do what you have to do. Now, obviously, like, as I kind of progressed through and, like, you know, I was playing representative rugby for, like, whatever regional team I was playing for or whatever, it would become, okay, look, you have to go training because this is important. If this is important to you, let's work hard at this. And it always came back to that, if this is important to you. It was never, this is important to me that you go and do this. So it was pressure, but it wasn't negative pressure.
Good, yeah.
And I think as a coach as well, you need to learn how to apply that.
Yes.
Like, you know, you need to, if this is important to you, this is what you need to do.
Yeah.
And I'm going to put pressure on you because you told me this is what you want to do. The moment you tell me you don't want to do this, I'm not putting that pressure on you anymore, right? Because it's not what you want. And it comes back to, like, you've got to meet lifters where they are.
Yes.
And this comes back to the two different types of powerlifters as well. And like, if someone tells me that they want to go out and they want to be winning gold medals and they want to be podiuming at nationals and they want to go to internationals, fuck yeah, let's put the foot to the floor and let's see if we can do this. And likewise, if someone tells me, I don't care about that. I just want to go out and I want to beat what I did before, or I just want to have a really good cycle and then go and try and enjoy my day. Fuck yeah. Let's go do that.
Man,
you know?
Do you know what? Like, this is like a really cathartic experience for me because I feel like I'm listening to like a soundboard almost, because I've had these exact conversations with people. Like, it's exactly that. Like, I don't think our job as coaches is to, you know, go easy on our clients or put no pressure on them. It's exactly that. It's this, the lifter or the athlete or the client or whatever name you want to give them decides what the desirable outcome is. And your job is to take from where that outcome is back to where we are, as you mentioned, meet the lifter where they are now and say, what is realistic in that time frame and what do we have to do? And that is what the pressure is. I need to make sure that you show up and do the things to have that outcome that you said you want. And even on the days you're like, oh, fuck you, fuck this, that's still my job to make sure the job is done. Now, if halfway through they're like, I actually really fucking don't want to do this anymore, that's fine. Like, I think it's one thing sometimes I think coaches miss, but I think lifters miss sometimes as well. We want what's best for the athlete, but the athlete is going to ultimately pick what is a mark of progress for them. Like, even powerlifting meets, like, you can't tell someone what's a win for them. Even a general pop client, we can't tell them what the win is. They're ultimately going to have an idea of what winning is in their mind. Like, there's like, I'll tell you this funny story just incidentally. I remember back when I worked in Flyfoot, one member said something to me. I was teaching a spin class, and it was this like meme in the gym that I hated spin, but I taught so many of them. But she was like, yeah, but like, you do all that training and you just lift the weight once. And I cracked up laughing, man. Because for these people, you know, the ability to cycle a bike continuously for 45 minutes was a better mark of performance and training than lifting a heavy weight. Yeah. And I was like, do you know what? You're right. Like, that's, and I tell that story now because it cracks me up. And I think that's like one of the biggest levities ever I've heard lended to powerlifting. Like, but let me ask you one quick question about your folks. Is there ever a chance you'll get them onto the platform?
No, I don't think so. My mum had a hip replacement when she was 58, I'm going to say, toward like second half of her 50s anyway. And she's only kind of getting back into exercising properly now. Right. Like COVID, like, she still go out and she'll walk every day, but, you know, in terms of running and all that stuff, no. And my dad had a really bad knee injury when he was playing. I mean, look, I don't know how much he can actually, but he's only getting back into it now. He had surgery on his shoulder pre-COVID, and he's going to get the other one done now. But he has no cartilage in his knee. And he had the cartilage removed in his knee when he was like 16 years old. So he's never really squatted, if that makes sense.
Because it sounds like that man previous to the shoulder could have done some serious work at bench nationals.
Look, I'm almost positive. I have this memory in my head, and I don't know if I've made it up or if it's real. Because like, we moved from Wales when I was 4, but I'm pretty sure I remember him doing a bench press competition in Wales before we moved over to Ireland. I don't know how accurate that is, but I'm almost positive.
I would like to believe that that's true.
I would too.
And that is what planted the seed for Ben Harrison to become a powerlifting coach.
That's what it is,
a powerlifter.
That's what it is.
Straight up, man.
Yeah.
But another thing, actually, I wanted to ask this, just, I know I'm kind of tying it back to when we were talking about your 8-week strength blocks with your like general population members.
Yeah.
What's the conversion rate for them to then maybe try a bit of powerlifting, if you know offhand?
It hasn't been so much recently, but like, so if we look at like my current, like, let's say my current roster of lifters, Donna Ivy initially started off doing that. Bert, who just competed at Masters Nationals, he originally started off doing that. There's a few of Scott's clients actually, Karen, Jackie. There's a few of Scott's clients, and then maybe 1 or 2 of Keen's clients as well.
Yeah,
and then there's also, off the top of my head, one who like did a powerlifting meet, really enjoyed it, but likes training in those groups. So like every now and then, she hasn't done it in maybe, well, definitely pre-COVID anyway. Every now and then she'd be like, I want to do a powerlifting meet, but I want to keep training in these groups. I don't want to go downstairs with the scary lads. I'm like, okay, look, we can make it work.
Yeah.
Like, you know, I wouldn't say there's a huge conversion. Like they all. I find this with powerlifting as well. Like, people talk like, oh, I'd like to do one of them one day. Yeah. And then, you know, when you're like, okay, we're going to do one. You know, like when we hosted that novice meet in KAOS, there was maybe 7 or 8 people that came from them and actually did that meet and loved it. But then for whatever reason, just never continued.
Jumped into an open. Yeah. I do love that about the sport though, because it kind of is something you can take up whenever suits, you know?
Absolutely.
Doesn't matter if you're 16 or 65, and it's one of the good things about it. And, but speaking more closely, you mentioned we just recently had Masters Nationals, and I know it was something I got a question on Instagram, and so did you, about considerations for programming Masters. You have a few Masters lifters yourself, I believe, am I right?
Yeah, I've got a few. Probably 4 or 5 now, yeah.
like, I'd love to know a bit more about that, because I feel like a lot of the time when we talk about powerlifting, there tends to be a bit of a hyper fixation on either the open or junior lifters. And I'll get to the junior lifters in a second. Like, obviously the open is like a really big, wide age bracket, and probably most of the people that are listening now fall into that bracket, which is fair enough, as that's where most of their interest is going to lie. But like, if people didn't check out Masters Nationals, I think they're really misunderstanding how good these lifters are.
All you need to say for how good Masters lifters is, right? Anthony McLagan, who won the 105s, would have out-totaled everybody at 105s Open Nationals by about 20 kilos.
Yep.
Colin Power, who I know he's come back from bicep injury, so he didn't compete at Masters Nationals, would have won the 120s.
Mm-hmm.
You know, my own client Mags, who went to Euro, didn't do Masters didn't do Nationals because she was going to Euros with the Masters the following week, would have podiumed in the 84s.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I think there's this idea amongst maybe not the lifters that have been around for a while, but newer lifters to the sport, that like, oh, they're old. Like, you know, like powerlifting is something you can do for years, man. You know, there's not necessarily a drop off either. So like, you know, there's some legit, really, really good lifters at Masters.
Mm-hmm.
And I love coaching Masters. Like, I know you were at Masters Nationals as well, right? How cool was the warm-up room?
That's like it. They're just what's the word? I don't want to say like humble or modest, because I think that's not, it's trying to present them as if they not taking themselves seriously as athletes. They are, but I think they see it for what it is. We're all here doing the same thing, and we're all having a good time.
I think it's a bit, I think maybe it's a little bit more life maturity.
Absolutely.
Do you know what I mean? It's less like,
these people are paying mortgages. Like,
yeah, and like, you know, they have real stress issues in there. Like, you know, you've got it when you've got a job and you've got kids and you've got a mortgage. Like, how well you do at a powerlifting meet. Yeah. I'm not saying it's not important. It's like, I know how important it is to the guys that I had competing.
On the pie chart of importance, it's not taking up as much as it is maybe for the person who's like 21 and this like powerlifting prodigy.
I love how like low drama a Masters warm-up room is.
You know, they cleaned up after themselves.
That's it, man. The warm-up room was spotless.
They were like loading their own bars and all. Like, I handled Alexandra. She's coached by Sean Ryan, I believe. He wasn't there, and TJ was handling her, but he had to leave. And like, she was trying to load her own bar for us. I was like, stop.
Yeah. So
she was so nice. Like, and that, even when we were all warming up on the same rack, I had James Kyle in with you guys. Like, everyone is so chilled out, so sound. You know what I mean? What's the older gentleman you train? You were saying he hadn't deadlifted in like months.
Oh, I don't train him. That's John O'Dwyer.
John O'Dwyer.
He lifts from City Gym, but there was no one there, so I kind of adopted him for the day.
And that just to speak to that, like, that's one thing I love about you guys and the Odyssey guys as well, is everyone just works together. There's no drama about who's on what rack. Everyone just jumps in, everyone gets the work done, and everyone kind of just shoots the shit. I'm just shout out to those guys and yourselves for that.
Well, to speak on that regard, right? Like, we are a small country, and powerlifting is an incredibly niche sport, right? Mm-hmm. I think to cause divides amongst what is already a tiny amount of people doing a sport is stupid, right? Now, I understand for competition purposes, you have like club championships and stuff like that, but ultimately, we're all driving towards the same goal, right? There's how many actual powerlifting gyms are there in the country? Like,
probably less than
7, 8, right?
10, yeah.
Like, we, as a community, to see the sport grow, we need to work together, but it makes everything better if everybody's singing off the same hymn book.
100%,
right?
Yeah.
If we're all working, like, there's no point having like, oh, that's Abs's rack, we don't go over there. You know, it's like, if we're all working together, and when, like, I mean, okay, we're talking if the goal ultimately is for people to go to international meets, you're all going to be training together anyway, right?
We're all fundamentally the same team.
Exactly, right? And to split such a small population into even smaller populations, it's just, when you step back and look at it, you're like, why are we doing that? Yeah. Like, we have a really, really talented pool of lifters, but we don't need to be splitting that up.
Not at all.
Right? And the other, like, from going to the 2 internationals that I've gone to in the last year, it's kind of made me appreciate more that, like, other coaches, we all get along. Yeah. Like, I've never had drama with anybody in a powerlifting warm-up room. Maybe once years ago when there was people hugging a rack or, you know, something like that. But like, there shouldn't be drama, right? Mm-hmm. Like, I know we're all competing against each other, But sport is a collaboration, even against people that are competing. Like, you're all agreeing to play by the same rules.
Yep.
You're all agreeing to do the same thing. You wait your turn to go on the platform, right? Like, it is a collaborative effort at the most part. And people from all different clubs are working together on the platform, or they're volunteering at the desk or whatever. Like, there's no reason to divide it up more than it already is. And if we're all pulling together, we're only going to make the community stronger. And I would rather take a smaller part of a bigger pie than a bigger part of a smaller pie. You know?
Let me do something, right? I think that's a very interesting topic, and I do want to talk to you about it. But only reason I want to put a pin in it is because I don't want to come away from the Masters.
Yeah, okay.
Straight away. No, because it is, and I think it can't. Like, Adam and I have talked about it, Jay and I have talked about it, and I don't think it can be said enough, because sometimes it's like we're all running towards the same goal, and every so often we'll just get this slight veer off where people are starting to focus on the wrong things. Like, I think discourse can be fine, and I think healthy competition makes us all better. But I do agree that sometimes it can veer into this like us and them, you know. But that's why, like, I do think that's a topic we can have a really good discussion on, because I think you get to look at it from a little, like you said, because you don't strictly hold your hand up and say we're a powerlifting club. You can kind of look at it from a slightly more removed, like, we don't need this drama. And you said it before we start recording, you know, you keep out of the drama, but you obviously can see when it unfolds. So I think your perspective would be good to have, because you're not in it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But the reason I wanted to actually talk about the Masters thing is because when I ran this Q&A, I was getting questions around like programming considerations for Masters and like realistic like rates of progress and things like that. Like, and I think you'll agree with this. There doesn't really have to be that big of a difference between any lifters. Like, I would actually argue that Masters 1 and the Open are essentially the same thing. Yeah. Like, I wouldn't, like, the only time I would ever look at considerations for anyone when it comes to their volume, frequency, whatever, their overall workload, is how much that individual can take. And I've got very young lifters that can handle fuck all volume. And I've got lifters that are in their late 40s that I can beat the shit out of. So I think it really comes down to the individual. And I think, particularly in a sport like this, trying to divide it up by age and that way, other than for a competition's sake, I think people are kind of like have self-limiting beliefs about their age. Like, if you're fucking 46, you're not like over the hill. You know what I mean? You can still probably lift extremely well. And you've probably got a lot of PBs left in you. You might, like, again, there's, like you mentioned, we talked about, there's other stressors to consider in your life that maybe a junior lifter or a younger lifter doesn't have to look at, you know, because mom washes their fucking bed sheets and cooks all their dinner. You know what I mean? They just have to get my assignment in. You know what I mean? Yeah, you're fine. You know, and that's not the shit on the younger lifters. Maybe a little bit, but I'll come back to them in a minute. But yeah, like, I really would, if I could speak to like the population of Masters lifters here, you know what I mean? I would say that, like, don't self-limit yourself just because society is, or the group think has told you that, oh, you're older now, you're less capable. I don't think that's true. And the older I get, I'm still waiting for this. Where is this meant to hit me? Like, you know what I mean? So I'd love to get your thoughts on that.
I think it's what we said earlier. It's meet the lifter where they are. Mm-hmm. So if, like, I have one lifter he's competed once. He was supposed to compete at Masters Nationals, but work scheduling conflicts couldn't, and he's actually injured at the moment. But he works as a fireman, right? He would train rings around, and the man is a workhorse. And I can literally throw as much volume and frequency and intensity at him, and he just soaks it up, right? And then I've got younger lifters, and I'm like, oh, okay, maybe we need to pull your benching back to like once a week. Do you know what I mean? So it's so much about the individual rather than looking at them as, oh, they're in this category. They're an individual person, right? And to rob a phrase that Adam Phillips uses, it bottoms up, right? Yeah. Meet the person where they are, and then you try something. And I was, okay, that went well, or that didn't go well. Let's try push it a little bit more. And sometimes, unfortunately, you only know where the limit is when you go past it. For sure. But then you just pull things back a little bit.
That's coaching, isn't it? Trial and error.
Absolutely, man. It's like what we do is science, but how we do it is art, right? You know, you've got to meet people where they are, and you've got to adjust the variables as best as you can to get them where they want to go. And like, when you stop looking at people as a certain demographic and instead look at them as an individual, that's where it comes. That's where the magic happens, right? Yeah. That's where it happens. Is like, you can have two people that are exactly the same age, and one can handle tons of training volume and the other one can't. Like, you know, you might have to limit them to like 3 or 4 working sets per week, sort of thing. And and then that can change as well based on like external factors, or based on stress and sleep and like nutrition and everything. So it's less about, they're a Masters lifter, we need to wrap them in cotton wool, and more, okay, that is a person that wants to do powerlifting, I'm going to treat them like I treat any other powerlifting client.
Yes.
Right. Now, like when you get to the extreme ranges, like you get to M4 or whatever, like it just might mean you start at a lower base point, right? But still, the same rules apply. And like all coaching is managing variables, right?
Yeah.
It's stimulus and recovery. That's all it is. And you've just got to get that ratio right, and then people thrive. So, and it applies to everybody as well. It applies to juniors, it applies to opens, it applies across the board. It's how much work can you do and recover from and still make progress.
Yes.
So,
and do you know, I just want to even throw just two things in there about if people are going to talk about considerations at masters, you may not necessarily deal with other people or other age demographics. These are just off the top of my head, maybe individual lived experience. One is, especially if you're getting masters powerlifters now, many of them have probably come into the sport, you know, in their master's years, as opposed to coming in from a junior, because just powerlifting has been that prevalent in all that time. So many of them, like I trained Mary Fusco, who is essentially only doing barbell training 2.5 years.
Yeah, so their training age is really low.
Yes.
Right. So there's not that much miles on the clock. I know they're might be more advanced in years, but in terms of what matters for us when we're actually coaching them, no, hell no. They haven't got aches and pains from decades of training. They've probably got aches and pains from decades of not training. Right?
That's it, yeah.
But like it's not a case of they've been burnt out from years of training. It's almost like it's just a person.
Yeah.
Right. And you don't need to take anything into consideration other than what you would take into consideration with every person.
Yeah.
So I don't buy the whole you need to train them differently because they're a different demographic. It might end up that you do have to train them differently, right? Because they've got more external stresses, or they've, you know, it's just maybe not as big a part of that pie chart as it is for someone who is in college and all they do is college and lift, right?
Yeah. The other piece actually I would say is as well is like obviously if they're older, the likelihood of them potentially have picked up, you know, aches and pains along the way is obviously going to be greater because they've had more life in the back pocket.
Yeah.
But the other point I would mention as well, and this is one that I've encountered, not very strongly, but to a degree, when people are that bit older, they can have a lot more ingrained belief sets that might go against what is going to be best for their outcomes.
Yeah. I would argue that if they are interested in powerlifting at all, they're probably not going to be as concerned as that as someone who is like, I'm not going to go to the gym because I don't want to hurt myself. So they're kind of maybe a bit more moderate than what, like if it's a 65-year-old client, than what an average 65-year-old client would be. Because like they want to powerlift, right?
They're a lot more open to experience.
Exactly. Like I have nothing but admiration for people that start this later in life because like I said earlier, right? I can only imagine how intimidating it is to want to walk into a gym having, like, if they've never previously trained, right? To walk into the gym for a first time as an elderly client and be like, oh, well, there's 20-year-olds over there fucking screaming at each other and slapping each other on the back before they go and deadlift. And, you know, I can see it being very intimidating. The other side of it is if that person has been around for ages, they're just going to get in and get their training done.
Yeah, and that's it. One thing I love, because I will say this that I love about masters, they're incredibly low maintenance as people. They just show up and get the job done. They do what they can. Like, I've had this where they understand auto-regulation a lot more. They just said, my elbows are a bit sore, so I just pulled back on this and I left out one of the sets of bicep curls. You know what I mean? Like, no problem at all. And they're a lot more socially calibrated. I can actually have a chat with these people. Like, one of the things I do genuinely miss about working in a commercial gym is the banter. I've always like said, oh, here come all the boomers. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Looking at their reading
Are we
glasses,
aging ourselves here though? Like, are we saying we have more in common with the 60-year-old masters than we do with the juniors?
Than the broccoli heads? Absolutely, yeah. For
broccoli
real,
SARMs heads.
On God, yeah. But like, this is it. Like, it's 100%. And I think it's probably because we work in an interpersonal role. The ability to have people that you're so much more clearly able to communicate with is way more important to me than how much they're lifting or what they're lifting or how hard they go or, you know, are they going to go kill these demons? Some demons going to be killed with steel, you know?
I'll tell you at the moment, right, I had a 74-year-old client who started with me about 2 months ago.
Wow.
And she's doing September. So she's like
Amazing.
6 or 7 weeks out from a meet now. And the training, because I normally don't work one-on-one with powerlifters that much, like maybe a couple of sessions initially to go through certain bracing or how I want them to do things or whatever. But she's had in like one session a week with me, right? Mm-hmm. And they have been the funnest training sessions I have done with a client in so long because it's so cool. And she she's got more enthusiasm and joy about it than anybody. Like she competed years ago in the IDFPA, but she hasn't done it in years, and she's always had issues with one particular aspect of one lift, and like we're working on that now, and you can see as she's starting to get it, she's just so happy about it, man. And it's just so enjoyable to see. It's fantastic.
I can even tell just by the change of expression on your face that this is like an hour session that you look forward to. Like this is somebody, man, those people are irreplaceable. I've got like like I mentioned before, I still do some one-on-one personal training, and it's a very small core group of people, but I actually look forward to those sessions. Then when I was like making the bulk of my income in coaching from one-on-ones back when I worked in FlyFit, I would have people that would be a bit more of a chore to train. I'm not saying, no, I will give it to this. I'd say 95, maybe even more percent of the people I've ever met through this, I don't know, medium have been dead sound.
Yeah.
But like some people are just a bit more of a chore to train.
Yeah, of course.
Whereas I've got like 6 of them or so now at the moment that I still do one-on-ones with every single week, and I have such a blast with them. They're such good, easygoing people. It's super easy to chat to. There's like a couple of them that are now flirting with the idea of powerlifting, and I'm like, please just stay as my client for a bit longer. Like we can get there, but you're
also like, how good is it as a job that you have those moments of like pure, it's just happiness and joy in you know what I mean? Like not many people get to experience that at work. Like I remember I worked office jobs for years and stuff, and it would be like, you don't have those moments of like, this is class.
Yeah.
You know, and as coaches and as trainers, I know we work, particularly if you work in person, right? You work unsociable hours, you work long hours, you work split shifts, you do all that sort of stuff. I know it can be a drag at times, right? God knows I know it can be a drag at times. But I think sometimes we lose perspective of like, we get to go to work in shorts and a t-shirt, right? Yep. And we teach people how to lift weights. Like that is a cool job, right? It is. And I think we lose sight of that sometimes. And I just, every now and then, like when we're talking here, I just kind of reflect on it and be like, yeah, it's fucking cool.
Straight, man, listen, right? I have lifters, like say like, so like we've got the September Open coming up. So I'm going to go down. I've already booked a hotel in Cork. I'm going to sit down for a couple of days. And I've like lifters there like, thank you for like coming down and like staying with us and being there for us. I'm like, I'm having a great time here.
You don't need to thank me for this. I would do this stuff anyway.
I love this shit. Like, you know, that's what I'm saying. Like, don't like they are like, that's it. Like, yeah, sure. Like they're long days, but it's such good crack. Yeah. Like Jacob, the photographer I had in there before, we were down in a city gym for the Open in February. And the whole joke we were having was like us, like, oh, we're in the trenches. It's like what trenches? We're having a ball, like, you know? So yeah, man, like I honestly, I totally feel you on that one. It's such, and especially when you're dealing with people like that, with a lot of masters, you're coaching or you're working with, and same for myself, like it just makes the job so, like Masters National was so chilled out. Like,
and you know, like not only was it so chilled out, it was also a really high quality meet. There were some unbelievable lifting that happened at that meet, like top standard. You know what I mean? And like lifters that you're going to see at like the next Masters Internationals meets. I know they're not going to Worlds this year, so it'll be Euros next year. But like you'll see them on podiums against other top masters from other countries. Yeah. And I know from the last two, we went to Worlds in Canada last year and then Budapest this year for Euros. Like we showed up as a nation really well at those meets. Like we had podium finishes. We like I think at Euros our M1 women's team podiumed for like overall team, and you know, like we have a really, really good standard of lifter in general, but Masters we really show up at Masters, like really do. Like I think at Worlds Anthony McLagan was like second best lifter. Colin Power won his weight class. You know, there's just I came back from Canada with a new appreciation for it. And
it's crazy as well when you look at how small Ireland is as a country in general, and then think about the teeny tiny number of people within the nation that do powerlifting regularly enough to be able to represent the country at an international meet. It really stands to show like we are, like, we're just spud eating, stubby people. We're doing pretty good.
The other thing as well is like I from being at these internationals, and look, maybe this is a case of it's just Masters and I've got a skewed perception of this, but we have really good coaches in this country. Yes. Across the board, right? There are coaches in every club in the country that I'm like, they are an excellent coach. And look, obviously you're in any profession, you're going to get people that are really good and people that are really, but we seem to have a really disproportionate amount of really, really good coaches. And it's funny, I had this conversation with Adam when we were in Budapest, Adam Phillips. And it's like, sometimes the difference between what's perceived as a good coach and maybe not such a good coach is the standard of their lifter. And it's like, that's an unfair thing to look at, because, you know, you could be the best coach in the world, but if you never have the best athletes in the world, you never get to show how good a coach you are. And, you know, you have one lifter, and then if that one lifter can make it, then it snowballs. And then you get more good lifters that are being attracted to you, and then you get a reputation for being a good coach. But genuinely, there are so many good coaches, good powerlifting coaches in this country. It's like the team GB in Budapest were full of praise for us, because, you know, we like, it is them stats that came out a year ago now?
Yeah.
About how temp selections it meets. Like we punch so far above our weight.
Yeah,
it's mad.
Totally, man. And I think actually, just to like tie it back in, we were talking about earlier, we're better off being unified than divided. This is a conversation I was having with Adam, and it's one of the advantages we have. And I think sometimes we don't see it as the advantage that it is. There is a benefit to having like all these high standard coaches that maybe have very slightly different approach. Like I'd say, like Adam said it actually, 90% of what we do is probably all the same.
Yeah.
And it's probably how we approach things is maybe very slightly differently. But that is to our advantage, because if we all did everything the same, we wouldn't see our blind spots.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know? So like it's the ability to look at, well, what are they doing that we're not? What are we missing that they're hitting on really hard? And true collaborative effort. Like this is one thing, like I think it was like the most roundabout funny thing years ago when there was all that like online shit between Odyssey and Abs. And now Jay was saying, oh, I'd consider Adam a mate. Like I like Adam a lot, like, you know, and that's crazy to me, like that it's come full circle, and the two head honchos in those clubs get on great, like, you know,
like just in terms of the standard of coaching, like if you go to any open, right, and just look at the amount of attempts that are made versus the amount of attempts that are missed, right? Like we have a disproportionately high number of made attempts compared to other countries. Like we just blow things out of the water. And I think a big part of it as well is from all levels of, particularly with the IrishPF now and the AB series, but the people that are in charge of the IPF, they're also still lifters themselves, right? It's not the old Blazer Brigade. So the younger committee, the EC and the operational committee, are constantly trying to push things forward. We're not doing things just because it's a status quo. Like, you know, things are getting progressed, and I'm really excited to see where Irish powerlifting goes over the next few years, because I think at the moment it's only going from strength to strength, and I just think that's going to continue.
I completely agree. I think we are still yet to see. I think like we're in a bit of a golden age, but I think we are yet to see the best.
Oh yeah.
Like if you look at the demand, like obviously I can see how quickly IrishPF meets sell out, because I have my lifters messaging me being like, yeah, I didn't get my ticket. I'm like, yeah, put yourself on a fucking waiting list. And then obviously I work behind the scenes a lot at the series, and I can see how quickly those sell out.
Yeah.
So I'm loving that. Firstly, that all these things are finding their place, because again, Adam and I talked about it. These things don't have to run in opposition. They run in parallel, because it's all still ultimately running to present powerlifting to the widest audience and make it accessible to the most amount of people. And I think as long as we keep that big picture in mind, it lends to everyone. Like we've talked about, there's no reason that, like, I know your club is open to everybody. Anyone can train there. And I think that's another huge step in the right direction for how we work together, because you might observe something that somebody else is doing that you might go, oh, that's actually really smart.
The part I love is I get to have conversations with lifters that are coached by other people, or other coaches that'll come in for a session, and you know, you get different perspectives on things all the time. And like, in terms of my own coaching philosophy, it's such a mishmash of all these different influences that I've had over the years that, like, I'll try something, and I went down one route for a while, and I come back to this one, and then, you know, you add this bit in, and you're like, oh, I did that ages ago. I wonder if that was work here. And then you know, when you've got all these different tools in your toolbox, and that comes from such a wide variety of just interacting with different coaches that have different ideas and different frameworks on things, that you can. I mean, there's not a person that works as a coach that you can't learn something as a coach as a coach. Like, you know, you can have a chat with any coach, and you can absolutely take something that person knows and just apply it to yourselves, or like try it and like maybe modify it your own way. But like, yeah, you were dead right in what you said earlier, when like 90% of what we do is exactly the same thing. Yeah. Like, you know, it's a squat, bench and deadlift. And I think sometimes we massively overcomplicate that, right? And then it's just controlling variables, but it's how people control variables sometimes, and the use of exercise variation, or the use of accessories, or even the use of frequency and stuff like that. That just, when you look at different coaches and different ways, and you're like, well, why is he doing that way? And then because we're such a small country, like I guarantee you could message any coach in the country and just have a conversation with them.
Absolutely.
Right?
That's pretty much what I tried to do.
Yeah, but that's cool, right? And
Yeah.
like, I think because we're such a small community, you get that shared information that maybe you don't get in other countries.
Yeah.
And like, I think it leads for a really, really exciting future for Irish powerlifting. I know Adam said it when he was on here as well, but I would be so much more excited for the future of Irish powerlifting than for powerlifting in general, if that makes sense. Like, there are so many countries where you look at them and you're like, oh, why are your meat so boring? You know what I mean? And we just seem to like, the Irish brand of powerlifting that we have at the moment is just, it's as a product, it's amazing.
I think a lot of it comes back to as well, like as a nation, there's typically a huge culture of sport all throughout, like not only like Dublin, but also all of, even like rural Ireland, like the GAA, rugby, even like football is obviously huge as well. So people in this country like their sport, you know? So giving sport to people who maybe otherwise may not have been into sport. You know what I mean?
Or people aren't into team sports. You know what I mean? Like that, it's just another avenue. And because, like you said, we have such a, I mean, as a country, we always punch above our weight in terms of sport. Anyway, like look at the rugby team, look at whatever. You know, we punch above our weight in terms of so many sports, and it just seems that trend is continuing with powerlifting as well.
Yeah, and that's I think to everyone's benefit. Like I definitely don't think there's been any major divisiveness in powerlifting in the last while. Anyway, I think look, social media is social media. Social media is going to do what it's going to do. Yeah. And I think the most unfortunate thing about it is people tend to read things out of context, if anything. I think ultimately everybody that's in it wants the best for everybody else that's in it and where it's going. Like we said, I don't think there's anything wrong with healthy competition. I think club championships are cool.
Yep.
You know, like 5 in a row, by the way. You know, but I think that's cool because I think everybody would love the idea at a national meet to be the club that beats abs.
Yeah, of course.
You know, we knocked them off that spot. And
you can guarantee the first club that does that, because it will happen eventually. Yes. Right? The first club that does that, that'll be a big thing.
For sure.
You know what I mean? And it'll be a moment that like whoever's involved in that will remember that without doubt. Like,
and that can only be fostered by friendly competition. And that's the best thing about it. Like I've even seen, like if we look down to the guys in Limerick City Gym, Urban Barbell, they've all been training together the last while.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I had Ian on the podcast and he gave me an Urban Barbell jumper and it's like fucking one of my favorite things to wear. It's mad comfy. But I've probably worn it out a little bit at this stage, but it's really nice. And I love the idea. Like obviously Ian is very closely associated with abs, but I love the idea of us all working more to, like, I think having your individual identity is good and it's important because people like to attach themselves to, like, I'm a KAOS lifter, or I'm a City Gym lifter. That's fine. But ultimately it's under the flag of
the IrishPF.
Team Ireland and the IrishPF for sure. And I think that is what will lead us much, much further into the future of what powerlifting could be in this country, because I still think it is very early days. Like look how far it's come since post-COVID.
Yeah.
So,
God, yeah.
What's 5 more years going to hold for us, you know?
It's exciting, man.
No, I want to ask a couple more. I won't keep you here ages longer, obviously, I know, because I have a tendency to go on.
Yeah.
But I want to know, because you posted a really hilarious reel not long ago, and I know I said it to you at the time, where you walked up to the rack and you're like, have you ever had a fuck off? And you just walked away. Again, social media, I would say, only really became incredibly like injected into society from like 2014, maybe, as Instagram, particularly here. Maybe that's my own confirmation bias because that's when I got a smartphone. But I definitely saw the influx of everyone being in social media and it becoming a much bigger level of importance, particularly in fitness, from maybe 2017, 2018. And then now it's like instrumental to most people's lives, but also the sport as a whole. Like, how have you found, even just for yourself, your own coaching, your own business, what has social media changed, both pro and con?
So in terms of my business, right, in terms of KAOS, I tend to not put up too much on social media. In terms of the gym and where it is, we're quite a community-based gym. So I tend to do a lot more on Facebook than I actually would on Instagram. And even what I do on Facebook is very minimal, but it would be usually posting into like community Facebook groups with whatever offerings we have. With Instagram, all I like to do is really to interact with people. Mm-hmm. Like, I don't like, I'm not good at social media. I'm not good at marketing. I'm just not. Like, I never have been. I've never really pushed it either. The influence, I mean, unquestionably, it is huge in powerlifting and fitness in general, right? And I think what I've always tried to do with with any sort of messaging that I put on Instagram is I try to just be as open and as honest as I can with it. Like I don't like I'm not, because I'm not good at it. I don't do big flashy reels or posts or whatever because it doesn't really interest me. I would much rather put up a Q&A and have people interact with me and all that sort of stuff. Like if you look at the KAOS Instagram page, I put up 2 reels. I've only put up 2 reels ever, and I've only done that in the last few weeks. And outside of that, mostly what I do is if someone tags us in a story, I reshare it. I'll put up a story. I'll put up a Q&A every now and then. I'll try to put up something that's maybe that tries to drive people to actually communicate with us rather than just here's a reel of me talking at the camera, because I'm not good at it and I don't like doing it. And I've been fortunate enough that I haven't had to up until this point. I'm sure that will change and I will have to adapt to it, like with everything. But I've always felt like I'm better at writing than I am at being on camera. So that's why Facebook has always been a better medium for me, maybe. With Instagram, I have a really weird love-hate relationship with social media. Like I love what it can do and I love the way it can connect people and all that stuff. But then like I know myself, I can just end up mindlessly scrolling for ages.
The doom scroll.
Yeah, absolutely. And I try to not do it as much as I can, but like there's times where I don't even know that I'm doing it and I end up doom scrolling. And it just I don't want to feed into that either, you know? But yeah, in terms of growing business, like because we have such a high retention rate with clients, I never really have to push the social media that much.
Do you think you've got like such a good like reputation in your local area?
Yeah, I think that's what it is. And like it's funny because like when we're like, say we've a week and a half left in this current 8-week block that we're doing at the moment, I'll put up maybe an Instagram post and a Facebook post towards the end of this week, and I'll share it into like the Selbridge Information Facebook group or other, local Facebook groups or whatever. And I'll get 3 or 4 inquiries from that. And that'll, like if I have like 5 or 6 people that are dropping off at the moment, I'll get 5 or 6 in through there. So it like without too much effort on social media, I managed to maintain it. Like most of our business is referrals and word of mouth.
Yeah.
And it's really weird. We get a lot of interactions through our Google page, like a lot of them, because I'll be open with this with people. I ask people for Google reviews all the time. It's like, once people have been with us for a few weeks, I'll be like, look, if you're enjoying it, do you mind just throwing a review up on Google there? It doesn't have to be any words. If you just put a star marking on it, it boosts us up Google search engine or whatever. And we get quite a lot of interest through that. I don't even have a website. We've got to where we are because we're good with people and we're good in person, and we have a good reputation locally, and that just kind of feeds onto itself. Yeah. And like I can't tell you the amount of times that someone shows up and they'll be like, "Oh, I was here because my friend was here a year ago and they said they really enjoyed it, but they moved away and it just took me a while to message you." And that's kind of how I've grown, and I've just been lucky in that it's happened like that.
That's probably the best way, because they say that in all business, the best thing you can get is a referral. Yeah. If somebody else says you're good, that's likely to get more people in because there's an inherent trust there between them, which they are now as a byproduct going to have a bit more trust in you, or at least it's an introduction. But the other thing is, I think this is something Dan here, the producer of Primal, have talked about. Bigger is not necessarily always better. You know what I mean? It's not always about the quantity or the number. It's about the quality of what you produce, and are you serving the people in front of you? Yeah. And it definitely seems like the people you work with are very well looked after. As you said, your retention rate is really good. And it seems if you have no great need to advertise all over the place all at once, probably means business is doing pretty good. Yeah. Especially with that truck you pulled up in here. But... And I think that's the idea. It's like when you can serve the people that are there and need your help, you're probably already serving in the best way you possibly can, rather than trying to artificially bump numbers.
Yeah, and I think like when we first started, like years ago now, doing like the 8-week blocks, we got lucky in that a few people that signed up. Like there was a local hairdresser that signed up. Hairdressers are, man, they're gold when you're looking for referrals, because they're talking to people all day, every day. And if they say they're going to a gym and they're really enjoying it, the person in the chair they're gonna mess it, and they give them a card, or do you know what I mean? Like I suppose I market more through referrals than I would through any other way. Like what I've noticed as well is when we get cold messages through Instagram or whatever, someone's like, "Hey, wanted to join," whatever. Those clients tend to be the ones that don't stick around, whereas referrals are the ones that do stay around.
Yeah.
And it's just the way it's kind of happened.
So on a more personal level, like, so one of the ways I would learn a lot more about you is those Q&As you would post. Like personally, I love those things.
Yeah, I love them, man.
I think it's the best. Like, they're fun to like listen to people's perspectives on, or read more of the perspectives. Like, would that be something you'd gravitate towards on social media as well? Like looking more into that stuff?
Yeah, for sure. I like interacting with people. So if I'm trying to do it more where, like, if I have a thought on something, I'll put it up and be like, what do you guys think about this? And, not that cheesily, hopefully, but, that kind of a thing where
it opens dialogue.
Exactly, right? And, like, I know, I've said this all along, I know once people come through the door with us, they tend to stay, right? But getting people through the door in the first place is the thing. So you get people through the door by building a relationship with them, whether that's a relationship from they've watched your Instagram stories or they've actually interacted with you. Like, I don't know if I told you, we did a podcast years ago. Like, we did like 5 or 6 episodes. And I had one client come in and was like, oh, I joined because I listened to that podcast. And I was like, that's fucking awesome. You know what I mean? That, like, I like interacting with people and talking to them. But I find the medium of social media, I don't know. I'm not interested in it enough to learn about it, and I should be. But I know that's where my downfall is absolutely in marketing myself, because I just don't do it enough.
I think it's that tricky position you find yourself in when your job is primarily like you're working with the person in front of you, or the group in front of you. And that's where the real value in communication lies. Yeah. It can be hard to take that same energy and apply it to your phone.
Yeah, absolutely. I find it awkward to talk. Like, I can sit here, I could talk to you for another 3 hours now, right? But if you ask me the same questions through Instagram and I had to talk to a camera, I can't do this. Yeah. I feel awkward.
I remember, this is just as an aside, years ago when I was still doing pro wrestling, right? I was off with a shoulder issue for a couple of weeks, and I started trying to make YouTube videos. And I remember I sat down, I'd like roll around in my trunks in front of crowds of hundreds of people, but I sat down with a webcam and a microphone. I was like, and I was like, how the fuck do I talk to a camera with no feedback? So I can totally get why that's a jarring experience for people. It's something like I've like made myself get better at. So that's why, like, and frankly, I hate typing. So I'm a fucker for like a voice message to everyone, even if they type back. I know they're trying to get me to type back. I'm like, I'm not doing that. And then same with the with like whenever I post a story, if I can talk, if I can get the point made in a minute video, I'm like, grand, that's what I'll put up, Yeah. Like, that's always a joke. If I do a Q&A, you're just going to see my face like 30 times.
So that's what I did. Like I said there, I posted two reels recently, right? And they were one take. And I think that's what I'm going to do going forward. That's my rule, is like, I'll do it in one take.
Good, yeah.
If one take is fine, then one take is fine.
Man, do you know what? Like, I wish more people would learn this about everything, whether it's powerlifting, whether it's coaching, whatever they want to do. Like, and this is not me judging your reels, right? Full disclosure, I don't think I've seen them, unless one of them was you talking from the squat rack. I think that when you had initially posted the funny one first. But like, it's okay to start something and not be great at it. Even if you're like, why am I so monotone? Why did I and M? Just post it. Just start. It will get better the more you do it. You're not going to get good and then start posting, So I think that's like a bit, same with like coaching. If people wanted to get into coaching, just coach people. Like, I know this, you know what? This was something I know I shouldn't be bringing these things up right at the end, but I heard this conversation before. It's like, what gives somebody the like authority or the qualification to call themselves a certain thing, like a powerlifting coach or a CrossFit coach or whatever it might be. And CrossFit's a little different, my friend, if they have a certificate. But like, I'm of the opinion, because this is one thing I've heard, people say, what do you think of like people that aren't very strong starting to coach powerlifters? I'm of the opinion, and I will get your thoughts now, I think more coaches is good because it brings more people into the sport. Like, some people might think I'm an asshole or I'm intimidating or they don't necessarily jive with the way I coach. Somebody else maybe has not had the same number of successes that I've had or you've had, but they really gel with that person much better on an individual basis. So they're giving them a doorway into participation, which will lead to more people in the sport, which is ultimately a net positive in my opinion. But what do you think? Yeah,
I would agree with that. I suppose I kind of roll my eyes when you see someone that's maybe particular, like, I think if someone has done a few meets and they've like maybe helped a friend or whatever, maybe then start selling your service. I think if you're trying to get people to pay you for powerlifting coaching when you've never done a meet, do you know what I mean?
It's a bit of a line,
yeah. You know what I mean? There's definitely, I mean, the line is blurry, I mean, like I said earlier, I took 4 people to a powerlifting meet, and my own experience was bombing out at the meet beforehand.
And the GPC.
And the GPC. Sorry, I forgot about that one. So like, I'm not going to sit here and be like, no, they shouldn't be coaching people, when that's exactly what I did. And it's easy to look at it from a position of, I've been doing this for a while now. You as a beginner should not do this, but like, that's what we did.
Yeah.
Or it's what I did anyway.
Well, I put it this way, because I would have encountered dozens, probably hundreds of coaches in the time I was in FlyFit that were like, yeah, I'm going to do this for a couple of months and then I'm going to get into online coach. And I'm like, hang on a minute. You can't solve people's problems in person yet. What the fuck would you be doing it over a computer for? So to work with people, like my advice, and this is to anyone who ever thinks about coaching and they're talking about, everyone thinks online coaching is going to be handier. It's not at all. It's way more work. It's way more admin. Because if you have somebody in front of you, you can solve like 20 things at once, because you can chat, you can talk, you can have discourse over the course of the hour and 90 minutes you're together. Whereas if you need to do this over a week or 2 weeks, because, you know, they're getting their check-in video and then your voice message and they're sending you videos, that's a way tougher job. And it takes time to have the eye for what you're actually looking for, you know? And I think it's that idea. People think it's going to be easier or it's going to be less time demanding. And my advice would always be spend at a minimum, I'd say 18 months on a gym floor and actually work with people, not just to become an expert at programming or exercise execution or whatever, but even down to just learning how to talk to people.
Yeah, I think it comes into the motivation behind why you're coaching in the first place.
Sure.
Like, why did you want to be a coach, right? And I think too many people get into it for the wrong reasons, and then they're in it for a short time, or they're in it to make a quick buck, and then they don't really care what they're putting out. You know what I mean? They just want people to sign up and pay them the money. I think if you're going to be in it for a while, you need to have a genuine interest in actually helping people, right? And all the good coaches that I know, at the core of it, when you kind of really boil it down, they have a genuine interest in impacting people's lives. And it can't just, I think the motivation behind it matters a lot in terms of how good of a coach you're going to be. Because if you're genuinely interested in making an impact and helping people, then you're going to do things like, you're going to learn more, right? You're going to be more self-critical, which I think is obviously the key to becoming better and improving more, as opposed to someone that's like, well, I'm getting paid 20 quid to write this program for this person, I'll just bash out 100 of them, you know? I think if you were genuinely interested in having a positive impact, you will put more time and effort into your craft, and you will become better through that. Now, yeah, absolutely. Look, it can be a hard route. It's time consuming. It's not exactly the most economical way to do things, but I think for terms of longevity for you as a coach and to do justice by your clients, I think that's the way it kind of has to be done. Everything has to be done with your client's best interests at heart. And my issue with a lot of social media stuff is it doesn't seem to be that way. And that, in case anybody's thinking that's a dig at them, it's absolutely not a dig at anyone in particular. It's just, there's a lot of stuff that happens on social media where you're like, oh, they just, you know, like they don't really care. They're just like, yeah, I'll write this program and send to that person. They'll be fine.
Sure. You'll see it sometimes. When I was walking down here actually with Jacob, we were talking about certain, like not any particular coach, just coaching. And many coaches just use their lifters or their clients as like a vehicle for their business. Like it's, that's like, oh, you are just my validation. You know what I mean? Like, and it's that, like, it's the small things. Like I can see, and you mentioned it before, one of your guys, Keane Robinson, so invested in his lifters. Like, and Keane always leaves an impression on me whenever I'm at a meet, because he's a cool guy. He's easy to chat to, but and Scott as well, just incidentally, just not to exclude Scott, but just as the three amigos coming in, yourself and the two lads, it always makes a strong impression on me about how invested you are in your athlete's experience, which I think is huge. Because like we talked about, the moments they're going to remember are not necessarily how much weight I lifted on that day, but was it a good day? Did I have fun? Did I feel backed? Did I back myself up? Did I have the support network around me? And like they're going to remember that high five, that fist bump, that hug, and the moment they walk off the platform, they got their white lights, and you know, you've got yourself and these two mad bastards jumping up and down behind you. Like, man, like those are the things I think really highlight to me who's in it for the right reasons.
Yeah, absolutely. And I said it, I think I said it to you off air earlier, but like, the biggest part of me making a decision to bring both of lads on board and to bring them into the team was they were good people that cared about other people. And that was like, if someone comes in and they are a good person and they have what I would consider the right intentions for being a coach, You can teach someone to be a good coach. You can teach someone to control variables. You can't teach someone to actually give a shit, right? You can't, like someone might know programming inside and out, but if they don't really give a shit about people, or they don't care about it that much, you can't, that's only going to last so long. Good people make good coaches, not the other way around.
I think that's a good place to leave it. Ben
100%,
Harrison,
man.
thank you very much.
Thank you very much for having me on.
It's been a pleasure. Thank
It
you.
has been.